and welcome to this edition of Inside Judicial Watch. I'm your host, Jerry Dunleavy. On May 17, 2017, Rod Rosenstein appointed Robert Mueller as special counsel, launching an investigation that's dominated much of the American political landscape ever since. And so today, we will be discussing the Mueller investigation 1 year in, how things got started, where things stand, what we've learned, where we think things are headed, and most importantly, what Judicial Watch is doing to help bring the truth to light. And so here to break all of this down for you and for us is Judicial Watch's Director of Investigations and Research, Chris Farrell. So thank you very much for joining me today, sir.
Hey, Jerry. Happy.
So let's talk really quickly to start this out about kind of where things stand with the Mueller investigation right now, at least as far as we know. What is Mueller up to right now?
All right, so one word answer, it's a disaster. Disaster is the key word to focus on. There's been little or nothing to show for the investigation itself. Friends of the Mueller investigation will say there have been 23 indictments. Okay, well, half of those are Russians who will never see a day in court. But it's a showpiece. It's a display to say, aha, we have an indictment. And then others that he's gone after. Let's look at Manafort, for example. He's probably the most significant character. They've gone after him for 2006 financial misdeeds, allegedly. Well, 2006 has nothing to do with 2016, does it? And Judge T.S. Ellis in the Eastern District of Virginia kind of pointed that out about, 10 days ago, where he was quite skeptical about the claims and the efforts of the special counsel to go after Manafort. And the question he raised, which we've been pursuing aggressively, is the scope letter, which is sort of the mission statement that Rosenstein gave Mueller and his team as to what they're supposed to look into, kind of the depth, the breadth of, this is your charter. Go forth and investigate, X, Y, and Z. And it's purportedly about Russian influence in the 2016 election. Well, Manafort running around the Ukraine with about 6 or 7 other political advisors, to include Podesta, one of the Podesta brothers, really doesn't have a lot to do with 2016. So they look a little desperate. They look to really have kind of exhausted things, but they continue to press and push. They've taken incredibly aggressive positions with respect to going after Mr. Cohen, the president's personal attorney. I'll give you one little anecdote. So a couple of good friends of mine who are FBI agents, one of whom had an extensive career working against organized crime in New York, said, the U.S. attorneys there would say, well, go after the bad guys, go after the various mobsters and mafia type, dons and all that. But don't go near their attorneys because it's too complicated. We don't even need to. The bad guys are bad enough. If you're really looking for criminality, focus on them. When you shift and you go after attorneys, then it becomes like quadruple complicated. Because even though you may have a mob attorney, he has other clients, there's other legitimate business that he does. He is protected in his status as an officer of the court and as an attorney. The whole attorney-client privilege issue comes up. And so the FBI and the U.S. attorneys in the Southern District of Manhattan and elsewhere around the metro New York area, even they were reticent about going after attorneys with respect to, telephone tap or mail cover or, even going in and searching an office or seizing records. So the fact that if that's the context, if that's sort of the historical approach that the Justice Department and the FBI have taken against real violent career criminals, right, mobsters, the lengths they went to go after Mr. Cohen, who no one has claimed has done anything violent or criminal, or they just want to find out about payments made to some porn actress. They are way far down the road and off running down bunny trails And I've yet to see anyone articulate the underlying criminal predicate to the investigation. Tell me what crime was committed. And then based on that, we conduct an investigation. We don't investigate people until we find a crime.
Right. Right. So, and this is kind of the I think a big sticking point when it comes to this investigation is there's the initial letter. I referenced the date, the appointment of the special counsel on May 17th, 2017, where he's sort of in brief, the reasons for the special counsel are laid out. And like you pointed out, it's essentially to investigate Russian collusion. And that was pretty much the main focus in that initial letter.
Right.
And then there's this other memo that's written almost 3 full months later, August 2nd, I think, by Rosenstein, about this scope memo, as you referenced.
Yep.
And this is something that Judicial Watch has been trying to get because we don't actually know. Now, I think that we got parts, some sort of like redacted portion, but we don't actually know.
First they denied it even existed. So first there was the, we don't know what you're talking about, and even if we did, we couldn't tell you. You know, that sort of an approach to things. Yeah. And so it's preposterous, but nonetheless we had to press. We had to go to court and sue to compel the production of the record. So after they got past the, we don't want to tell you, we're not even going to discuss it level, then we get a redacted form, heavily redacted form of the letter, and that's been made public. People have seen that. But the substance of it, the actual real contents, is what we've been pressing for in court. Congress has asked for it. So there's a few different kind of approaches to get there. But you know, why would that memo be secret? It's a mission statement. You know, special counsel, go and conduct the following activities targeting these questions. So they're going to be compelled to produce it eventually, whether it's Judge Ellis, whether it's committees of Congress, whether it's our litigation, it's going to come out. And the lesson there, I think, for perspective is you'll recall when Devin Nunes, the chairman of the Intelligence Committee, did his 3.5-page memo based upon what he had discovered. And you'll recall that, you know, that was the release of that was supposed to bring about the collapse of the republic, right? That was going to be the end of the world if they released that. The FBI sent over 5 subject matter experts really to threaten the president and General Kelly. I mean, they say they were consulting with them about why they shouldn't release the memo. But when 5, you know, self-anointed experts show up to try to browbeat or, you know, in some way cajole you into not approving the release of something, there's a message there, right? They were not successful, the 5. The president ordered the release. It became public. People read the 3.5 pages that Mr. Nunes, and everyone kind of went, oh yeah, okay. I suspected that, but now we see it in writing. And what it really points to is that the position of the Justice Department and the FBI, I mean, they were lying. Let's just be clear. Let's call it what it is. When 5 guys show up and try to strong-arm you into not releasing something, and they're all experts, and they're going to tell you, oh, we can't possibly, oh, sources, intelligence sources and methods and law enforcement techniques will be revealed. None of that was true. But they're in such a panic mode because they know how bad it is that they will say virtually anything in an effort to conceal and to obscure what they're really up to. That's the lesson. So when you hear kicking and screaming about this scope memo and how, oh no, you can't possibly see it, it's all confidential, baloney. So we'll get to it. It'll be made public. But I think that our viewers should understand that this notion that the Justice Department and the FBI are these sort of, you know, defenders of justice and the American way, and they're really looking out. No, they're not. No, they're not. They've been caught, and they're frantic not to be exposed.
So let's tick through some of the other things that Judicial Watch is trying to get, sort of in that same vein.
Sure.
And a lot of it is based on things that we know now, or at least have an idea about now that we maybe didn't when the special counsel was launched a year ago. Okay. So Peter Strzok and Lisa Page, these text messages.
Yeah.
talk with me briefly about kind of where things stand with getting these now and why we want them, and sort of what progress is being made between us and Congress making that happen.
Right, so these text messages are pretty salacious because they're so over the top. It's the unedited, off-the-cuff, really sort of adrenaline and emotion-fueled exchanges between FBI agent Strzok, who's kind of in the middle of everything. He's really the key witness, I think, to this entire event. And his girlfriend, who's an FBI attorney, who recently resigned or retired. And it's their back and forth. And there's some pretty important stuff in their back and forth. It's not, just cutesy little love chat or whatever. I mean, they're talking about targeting people, going after stuff, who they're briefing, what they're trying to hide from public disclosure. At one point, there's a Lisa Page text message that says, POTUS wants to know everything we're doing. Well, that makes reference to Obama, right? So the notion that there was no connection or direction from the White House is exploded in that one text message, right? So there's a wealth of stuff in there. A lot of it is kind of inside baseball stuff where you have to understand FBI and Department of Justice parlance and their kind of shorthand abbreviations and acronyms to really decode what they're saying. And we've tried to do that. We've put some press releases out and some documentation out to help people understand that. But they're very important. Interestingly, just in the last, I think, 10 days, I believe it was Senator Grassley asked FBI Director Wray to go after the text messages between Strzok and Page on their personal cell phones.
Right.
Because there's all these official communications on their government phones, but they also are quite clear that they're using non-governmental means of communication to relay other information. So whether it's Gmail or iMessage or Signal or whatever they're using to talk to each other, Mr. Grassley said, I believe you have an obligation to pursue those. And what was Ray's response? No.
No.
It's outrageous. I don't know how they can, the notion, just based on what we've already seen, and they point to their non-governmental stuff as well, we'll talk about this offline or whatever.
Right.
That would, in theory, be the most compelling, on-point set of communications that you never want to see. And Ray says, well, I don't feel an obligation to go after their personal cell phones. When you already have this demonstrated set of behaviors and conduct and opinion.
Tens and tens of thousands of these messages showing what they were thinking and what was driving them and everything like that. And
then you wonder why, well, how did all this happen?
Yeah.
Well, so it's, to me, I don't know how Ray thinks that he's preserving the integrity of the FBI or, from outsiders looking at it saying, oh, well, he's even-handed. He's trying to just collect the facts and let's just see what it says. They don't want to. They're playing ostrich, right? They're jamming their head down in the sand so far because they have guilty knowledge, in my opinion, of just how bad it is, and they don't want to see anything further come out.
Yeah. So let's talk about another aspect of this that we weren't really aware of when the special counsel investigation was launched, or at least didn't have as much knowledge about it as we do now, and that's the role that the dossier played in all of this. Christopher Steele's dossier played in all of this, and the sourcing and funding of it, and kind of so walk me through kind of what we knew in May of last year versus what we know now, and what's still kind of being, at least to a large extent, sort of concealed from our efforts to, to uncover more.
Yeah, the sort of bottom line up front on that is someone shot around a photo on public media or social media where it's President Trump and Hillary Clinton shaking hands. And the caption was something like, the only photographic evidence of President Trump engaged with the agent of a foreign power, right? And so whether you go back to Uranium One or whether you go back to Hillary Clinton and the DNC funding
Right.
the development and the distribution of the Steele dossier. Look, Steele had to go find people in Russia who had purported to have knowledge of some wrongdoing. Those people did not work out of the goodness of their heart. They intended to be paid for the information. And I would say up in the 90th percentile, that those persons involved in sort of feeding the Steele mill on this were either active agents of the Russian government, their intelligence service, the FSB, or were sort of either witting accomplices or dupes who were being manipulated to provide that information. So when you kind of just abbreviate the whole thing, Hillary Clinton, through a couple of cutouts, was paying Russian agents for dirt that was non-existent, but nonetheless salacious material to attack President Trump.
A few steps removed, but
yeah, I mean, there's
there
arm's
you go.
length, and they're very careful, right?
Right.
There's always this sort of legal arm's length of, well, we didn't directly. We hired a firm, and that law firm then hired somebody else, who then used their own sources. So they're very clever in building in sort of legal insulation, but when you pull out all the happy talk and you just kind of draw a straight line, where did the money go? You know, the old line, follow the money. Follow the money, see where it went. And that's, again, that's the lesson to be drawn from this. So there's a lot of happy talk and smiley faces, and oh no, we didn't know, and we only paid them and they paid somebody else, and that's deliberate, right? That's the insulation or the buffer they build in order to pretend that they have clean hands. But if you just follow the money back, Clinton and the DNC ended up paying Russian, probably government, if not co-opted actors, to generate garbage to dump back into the American political system. That's the shorthand version. It sounds more like a President Trump tweet. But it's a shorthand that also has the added advantage of being true.
right.
So
Yeah. Yeah. Talk with me about, now Fusion GPS was kind of the sort of the go-between, right?
Yeah.
Sort of the
yep.
that
broker.
arms,
They
the
brokered
broker,
it.
right? The
Yeah.
arm's length that we're talking about here. So, talk with me about the role that Fusion GPS played when it came to putting together the dossier, and talk with me about what Judicial Watch is trying to do to really get to the bottom of that, because I know that obviously Fusion GPS was being paid by the Clinton campaign and the DNC. They were working with Christopher Steele, and they were finding all sorts of different ways to get the information here and to get it to this agency and to that. So walk me through a little bit about that, and then if you wouldn't also mind, sort of walk us through then, once Fusion GPS sort of spread this information around, what role, if any, is the dossier still playing in your mind?
So, I mean, I said brokerage from before, and that's really probably a good way to describe what they were doing. So they're taking payments from a DNC law firm as this sort of opposition research entity. I tend to think of them more as opposition manufacturing. They're not really researching so much as they're manufacturing stuff. But Glenn Simpson is one of the head characters at Fusion GPS, a career journalist, who knows sort of where to go and who to talk to, and he has lots of contacts. And he's also quite skilled at marketing, right? He knows how to package a story to make whatever highlights he wants to come out that way. They engaged the services of Christopher Steele, who's sort of in the same business in the UK. And they had their narrative. They had the story that they were being paid to generate, and they did. And so there's kind of two ways to the flow of information. One is, okay, they get their marching orders via a law firm from the DNC. They say, all right, we need to go out and create a package or a dossier, a storyline that is enormously damaging to Trump and his circle of people. Steele's engaged to do that, they're the conduit for both direction and funds to steal. But then when they get information back, they then turn into sort of a marketing machine. And so they're going to message for them. And so that's how you see newspaper stories planted. That's how you see sort of a whispering campaign, where even if they're not explicitly going to dump information, they try to generate a certain buzz within media circles, whether it's talking to producers or other reporters or editors, saying, hey, look, this thing's out there and it's really bad. And that's a pretty irresistible lead for a lot of media types, particularly those on the left who are dying for a story just like this. So they know their audience, they know their appetite, and so they're very good at creating a wonderful dish, for the appetite. Mm-hmm. I think the other thing that's even more insidious is one of the Fusion GPS staff members is Nellie Orr, the wife of Bruce Orr, who was at the time the number 4 official in the Justice Department. And so you've got this official, unofficial contact of the Orrs. Mrs. Orr, Nellie Orr, is in the midst of this whole dossier campaign, and her husband essentially serves as the conduit for that information to go back into the Justice Department, either officially or through, hallway whisper campaign kind of stuff.
And if I'm not mistaken, Bruce Orr, the number 4 at DOJ, was himself even in communication with
Steele.
Yep. Yeah.
So this is all very cozy, right? This is a case where it could not be any better rigged or kind of set up. And so while all that's going on, realize, Strzok and Page are still running around doing their thing.
Right.
You have, in conjunction with Andy McCabe, the number two at the FBI, McCabe's calendar shows meetings with Lisa Monaco in the White House. Monaco was the Homeland Security Director for the Obama administration. Again, this is another White House tie. Mm-hmm. So McCabe's running over, I think the first calendar entry is May 2016. McCabe's running over and briefing Lisa Monaco on this whole operation. I mean, this is quite a little 3-ring circus, right? There's a lot of stuff going on. And a lot of players,
a lot of
You need a scorecard.
That's
you
right,
really
yeah. So all of this is happening. How does this start to sort of, it starts to narrow in, right? We start to get, how does all of this lead to the FISA application, the FISA warrants, everything like that? I know that Judicial Watch has lawsuits to, get information on the applications, on the warrants, on the court hearings, and everything like that. But what sort of role does the dossier end up playing there, and how do the FISA proceedings sort of guide it more towards where we end up?
Yeah. So McCabe is under oath saying that the foundation for the FISA warrants was the Steele dossier.
Right.
That's definitive, and he's under oath saying that. So it's kind of hard to backpedal now and say, whoops, we didn't really mean it, or it wasn't as bad as you thought, and so I think it's important for folks to understand how a FISA warrant works or what it is. And so the foundation piece for a FISA warrant is a sworn declaration, normally from a special agent, but it sometimes can be a Justice Department official, but a special agent of one of the alphabet soup of law enforcement agencies. So probably in this case, an FBI agent. And so this FBI agent makes a declaration that says, I'm Special Agent so-and-so, I've been with the Bureau for 18 years, and I've been in leadership positions, and I'm the head of this, whatever, investigation. We've been investigating A, B, and C. We've developed substantial information. We have every reason to believe that this criminal conduct is ongoing, and therefore, FISA court, based on all this background we just gave you, that I'm giving to you under oath, we request that we have foreign intelligence surveillance capability, electronic monitoring, the telephone tap or interceptive communications. We have to have this in order to kind of complete the case.
Right.
And that's sworn to. And that declaration from the agent then is like the main appendix or exhibit to an application from the Justice Department that's signed off on by no lower than the Deputy Attorney General. And that's their explanation and justification that, hey, look at this exhibit from the agent. Everything in there is true. We endorse that, and we find it compelling, and we're asking the court to please grant this authority. And so let me tell you something. If a Deputy Attorney General or the Attorney General is signing off on something like this, and they're making it a record in a court, this is not some like quick memo. This is a very serious document, right? Everyone's sworn to it.
Right.
The government lies about it all the time, unfortunately. Like the Associated Press was tapped on a false warrant. So was James Rosen, who at the time was with Fox News, another phonied up one. So they're not above lying about all this, unfortunately. They do it pretty routinely, and I think in sort of a cavalier way. But in theory, it's a very serious document and should be viewed that way, and the court treats it that way. That warrant application then goes to the court, judge reviews it. Like 99.9% of the time, those FISA warrants are approved.
Right.
We may wish to pause and think about that now, but that's the fact of what happens. And so that gets you the FISA warrant, which gets you the ability to monitor communications of persons that are targeted by it. And
the Steele dossier per
Andy
McCabe and sort of all of sort of the other things that have been revealed, it seems like the dossier played a very substantial portion
absolutely
in all of this.
Their words under oath, they swear it's true.
So how does that investigation lead to Comey, lead to Mueller? I mean, because we end up getting to that point where there's this investigation based on the dossier, based on FISA warrants and FISA applications and everything like that. And then how do we end up with a special counsel here at the end?
Right, well, Comey, as FBI director, decides to unlawfully selectively leak memos concerning his privileged communications with the president. And so he has these meetings with the president, both with other people there, but then also private one-on-one meetings. He memorializes those meetings in these memos. Those are federal government records. I don't care what he says on his book tour. Those are federal government records. It was, memoranda created by the director of the FBI on government time while he was drawing a government paycheck on government laptops that were secured in a government system of records that he selectively decided to go leak on and release them to his friend, who we find out was not just a friend, but he too was a part-time special government employee. It gets worse and worse as it goes on. The more Comey talks, I think, frankly, the better.
And I believe he's also named that person from time to time as his attorney as well.
Exactly. Right. In an effort really to insulate himself again, right? So you can't ask him any questions. Again, a very self-serving situation. But Comey does this and admits he did it in order to compel the appointment of a special counsel. And really the special counsel is going to come down to two people, either his best buddy, Mr. Mueller, who they've known each other for decades, and then other people have talked about, well, maybe Patrick Fitzgerald, another very prominent, famous U.S. attorney, maybe he was going to be appointed. Well, it turns out that Comey had already contacted him to be his personal counsel as well.
Right.
So this is all very convenient and cozy, and everybody knows everybody else, and it's sort of self-dealing, really. But that's how we get Mr. Mueller. And I remember sitting watching last June the Comey in front of the Senate Intelligence Committee under oath, admitting to everything we just talked about doing the memos and then releasing them to his friend and all that. And this collection of senators over in the Intelligence Committee, Mr. Burr from North Carolina and Mr. Warner from Virginia. I mean, these guys, I don't mean to be cavalier or flippant or whatever, but they're morons. This guy's testifying to them under oath how he violated the law, and they're all nodding very seriously, furrowed brows and taking in this information. There's no awareness on their part, apparently, that what he's just admitted under oath breaking the law. And then they thank him for his, illustrious service to the country. I mean, arguably the sergeant at arms should have been called, and he should have been Mirandized and arrested. But all the senators sat there, sort of clapping like seals and saying everything was great. And Comey wanders off to go write his book and go on a tour around the country. Let me tell you something. If you went and talked to any either intelligence person or law enforcement person, anybody in the armed services who has a job in the intelligence or law enforcement field dealing with classified information, and you said to them, imagine if you did that, they would burst into laughter. Literally, a week ago, I was at dinner with somebody who's a CIA person, and I said, well, just put the shoe on the other foot. Imagine if you did. And they laugh. I mean, the uncontrolled, spontaneous laughter, because they know they would be hammered. Their careers would be over. They'd be either fired or jailed. And so the disparity of treatment here is another thing that I think our supporters and our viewers really choke on. They see that laws are for the little people, and if you're connected and you have enough horsepower and you're part of the government machine at the high level, you can do essentially anything you damn well please with little or no consequences, especially if you're on the right team, right? If you have the right connections, then it's no big deal. But they know whether they're a deputy sheriff or a GS-13 intelligence analyst, or they're, take your pick, any other sort of government person with some responsibility and authority, if they had abused it that way, forget about it. They'd lower the boom on them.
Not just the act of taking this information and leaking it, but then also admitting that you had very specific, goals in mind in terms of creating new investigations.
First, they were attempting to steer an election. Let's be very clear. They wanted to steer the outcome of a presidential election. That's just a fact. Now you can say, well, you don't know that I do know it. All you have to do is really examine the evidence and think about where they were going or where they were going and how they were doing it. They were attempting to steer a presidential election. Then when they didn't get the outcome that they desired, then they sought to immediately undermine the Trump transition and then the Trump administration. And we know that because, again, another one of Lisa Page's fabulous text messages, she even calls that effort, she gives it a nickname, like a mission nickname. It's called Latitude. And she names it that, and Strzok, oh, that's a great name. He's complimenting her on her nickname selection. So we know, the public knows, that this whole effort to attack the Trump candidacy, Trump transition team, Trump administration, from their point of view, was just one long, ongoing operation. They hated him up front. They were shocked that he was elected. And they immediately attempted to target him, meaning President Trump and his circle of advisors, to really offset or overcome or disrupt the election. And it has a name. It's called Latitude. So, the truth is bad enough. Nobody needs to make anything up when it comes to this scandal. The news coverage of it is very uneven and not even-handed. But that, I think, over time will change because, people lie and documents don't. And so the more these documents we get and we make public, it'll be more apparent.
So speaking of documents, as we wrap up here, so this sort of, the genesis of this starts with the sort of the Clinton DNC, Fusion GPS, dossier, which we're trying to get documents on, leads into, among other things, but as McCabe said, a main portion leads to the FISA application, FISA warrants, everything like that. This investigation going on, which we have a lot of FOIA requests out on the FISA stuff, leads to this investigation. Comey ends up getting fired, leaks his memos, which we have FOIA requests out on that as well, and that sparks the special counsel. So there's sort of this line from one thing to the next. So, and then as the special counsel goes on, investigation goes on, as you referenced at the beginning, we now have him running into some roadblocks when it comes to Judge Ellis in the Manafort case, sort of challenging his scope and that sort of thing. So where do we kind of have this line, we're still trying to get information about all of these things, but we know a lot more than we knew a year ago.
Absolutely.
So where do you see it going from here as we wrap up? I mean, what is there left to learn? And kind of, you don't have to give me a prediction if you don't want to, but kind of what direction do you kind of see all of this headed, and do you see things coming to a head?
So there's a few different pieces here, and they're kind of big pieces, so I'll try to be brief.
Yeah.
The Mueller investigation is sort of in a slow motion deflation. They would like to get to the president and interview him under oath. I think it's preposterous, and I think that even if the president wants to do it, he shouldn't, because it's just going to be fodder. Look, the objective of the Mueller investigation is there is no Trump 2020. That's the political goal and objective. This is sort of the third or fourth stage of latitude, right? The larger operation. So he got elected. We tried to damage him. There was some success, nothing substantive, but a lot of screaming and running in circles, but no real there. So now what we have to do, when I say we, I mean the special counsel, what they seek to do is, well, if we can't get him, well, then we have to so muddy him and all those around him that he is in a politically untenable state as 2020 approaches. We have midterm elections in 2018, assuming Democrats have big House pickups. It's going to be 24/7 impeachment. That's all you're going to hear. They won't say that on the campaign trail because they know it doesn't poll well, but secretly the effort is to have President Trump be a one-term president and knock him out. That's the broader sort of political goal, in my opinion. We will get more records and documents. More people will come forward and I think really be whistleblowers or a form of whistleblowing because they're disgusted. The FBI as an institution, in my opinion, is now shot. I've proposed that the entire operation be wound down and put as an investigative arm under the U.S. Marshal Service. Because I don't think it can continue given the compromised nature and the very poor morale in the field. I would like to see greater focus on the actual real collusion, which is between Hillary Clinton and the DNC and these other operatives. They're the ones coordinating with the Russians. I'd like to see the DNC server issue resolved. If you want to talk about Russian interference and hacking and all, never been looked at. Mm-hmm. I'd like to see a connection made, and I think there is one that has yet to be fully revealed, between Debbie Wasserman Schultz and the Awan brothers on Capitol Hill and the computer information systems mischief there with the DNC. I mean, who was at the head of, well, Debbie Wasserman Schultz was the head of the DNC. She has this huge problem on the Hill with the Awan brothers, yet there's also a DNC computer hack. I mean, I don't believe in coincidences, so I'm willing to think that there's something somewhere in there that could be connected. There's a lot of rocks left to be turned over and poked around at. I guarantee you we're more than happy to do that, and we will do that. Mm-hmm. So I guess, our viewers should rest assured that no matter how murky and long and twisted the tale is, we never quit, we never forget, we never let go. I mean, so we're going to drive this into the ground and get the answers that they're owed. It'll make people very uncomfortable and very angry and upset, and that's fine, but we're going to do it. Because this probably has been, at least in this century, the greatest threat to the legitimacy of elections, to the whole constitutional process, to the compromise of very senior people, both in law enforcement and the intelligence world. We haven't even touched on Brennan and Clapper. That'll be another show. But there's a lot of problems here, and it's not going to end anytime soon, unfortunately. It's going to be kicking and screaming to the very end. But that's what we're here for. That's what we do.
Right. Because, and like you said, we haven't even touched on the involvement of the other parts of the intelligence community and the leaks and unmasking and everything.
Don't forget
like
the efforts to plant a mole inside the Trump campaign on behalf of the FBI. There's a lot of pieces to the story.
A lot of pieces to it. I think we did a decent job of kind of helping our viewers get to up to speed a little bit about where the Mueller investigation is right now and how it happened. But like you said, there's a lot more to dive into, so I will have to bring you back. But thank you very much for being with us today, Mr. Farrell, and thank you for joining us as well. Be sure to continue to follow Judicial Watch's work, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube. We're on top of this and plenty of other investigations, so be sure to continue to follow our work. And until next time, I'm Jerry Dunleavy for Inside Judicial Watch. Thanks for joining us.